The Texans are looking more dangerous than ever as we approach the season opener. Texans fans, we have two massive updates to cover. A veteran blocker is stepping into a starting role after a teammate went down with a foot injury. And our head coach officially decided to bench every single starter for this final game. Subscribe to help us hit 4,000 subs and comment your city to show how far our fan base reaches. Trent Brown will serve as the starting right tackle for our team after Braden Smith sustained a plantar fascia injury that leaves him sidelined for several weeks. This shift at right tackle is significant because Brown has proven experience, having started 8 games during our perfect 8-game winning stretch last season. I remember watching those games, and he truly held his own in the trenches when the pressure was high. Now, with Smith dealing with this setback, the front office is forced to lean on that veteran reliability to keep the pocket clean for our signal caller. Is this the real deal? Or are we getting ahead of ourselves by trusting a veteran who was already fighting for his job throughout the summer camp? I am excited to see him back, but I also want to pump the brakes a little until we see how he handles the full speed of the regular season opener against the Buffalo Bills. And this is the part that gets me. The depth chart shuffle at tackle is clearly a defensive measure for our coaching staff, ensuring that our protection remains solid while we navigate these final roster decisions. Seeing Braden Smith down is frustrating, no doubt about it, but knowing Brown is waiting in the wings makes me feel like we are not completely dead in the water. We need that continuity up front to execute our scheme effectively, especially early on. Do you think Brown can return to his high-level form from last year immediately? That is the lingering tension hanging over this unit as we prepare for the official kickoff. We are definitely watching how he manages the snap counts over these next few practices because his performance dictates so much about our offensive identity. It is a massive opportunity for him to secure his spot permanently. How does this sudden shift impact our offensive identity when the stakes are so high? Honestly, the situation with Trent Brown becoming the default starter feels like a high-stakes gamble born from necessity rather than a planned transition. When Braden Smith hit the injury list with that plantar fascia issue, it fundamentally changed the arithmetic for the front office. Looking back at his performance, Brown was on the field for 8 consecutive wins last season, which provides a level of comfort that most teams at this stage in the preseason simply lack. Does his past success automatically translate to a dominant 2026 campaign, or are we relying too heavily on outdated momentum? I'm encouraged by his history, but I want to keep my expectations tempered because these injuries are notoriously unpredictable. And the intensity of a regular season schedule is entirely different from what we saw last year. Here's the thing, nobody wants to say. Trusting a veteran who was already in a heated competition for his job is a massive roll of the dice for our coaching staff. They are likely calculating his snaps with precision, trying to balance his veteran savvy against the physical toll he can withstand right now. If he stays healthy, his familiarity with the scheme could provide the steady hand we desperately need while Smith recovers. I suspect the front office is viewing this as a temporary bridge to maintain continuity in the trenches, avoiding a complete scramble on the depth chart before we face the Buffalo Bills. Ultimately, this move reflects the reality that in this league, your season often turns on the depth behind your starters. I am anxious to see how the line adjusts to this change, but we must acknowledge that Brown has been here before and performed when we needed him most. Now let's get into the update regarding our final preseason matchup against the Carolina Panthers this Friday at 6 p.m. CT. Head coach D'Amico Ryans confirmed that no starters will participate in this contest, marking a major shift in our approach as we prepare for the regular season. Does this decision actually benefit our preparation, or does it leave us questioning the readiness of the entire unit? I understand the logic behind it, as our primary roster has already seen significant work during Wednesday's joint practice sessions with the Panthers. This approach limits unnecessary exposure to injury risks, especially since we are already navigating hurdles with players like Jaden Higgins, Braden Smith, Dylan Horton, and Ali Gay sidelined. And I cannot stress this enough, the health of our key contributors remains the priority for our front office as we look toward the Buffalo Bills opener, with CJ, Stroud, and the starting offense getting minimal snaps throughout the preseason. The focus now pivots entirely to the backups like Davis Mills and Brett Ripien. These players must demonstrate their value while competing for roster spots or cementing their roles on the depth charts. Watching them manage the snap counts and execute the X's and O's without the usual starters on the field will be our best indicator of how prepared our overall depth truly is for the long year ahead. I am excited to see what these reserves bring to the table, but I also want to pump the brakes until we see the full squad at Reliant Stadium. It is a calculated move by our coaching staff to prioritize safety over exhibition results. Can our second stringers perform under the bright lights of H-Town and make a statement before final roster cuts are made? That remains the biggest question. Keeping our core contributors off the field for this final exhibition against Carolina is a calculated gamble on long-term health, even if it leaves some of us feeling restless. My honest take here is that protecting our starters from unnecessary exposure is the right call, especially since the joint practice on Wednesday provided enough high-intensity reps to get the rhythm flowing without risking a setback. The upside is obvious. By avoiding further contact for CJ Stroud, we lower the likelihood of an unexpected injury that could derail our season before it even kicks off. However, the downside remains that our offensive chemistry could feel slightly rusty when we finally face the Buffalo Bills. Critics might argue that extra live reps help in tuning the finer details, but with injuries to players like Jaden Higgins and Braden Smith already complicating the roster, I see why the coaching staff is prioritizing durability over exhibition experience. Other teams across the league are navigating similar dilemmas, and many coaches share this conservative philosophy regarding established veterans during these final weeks of August. Davis Mills and Brett Rypien now shoulder the burden of leading the offense, and their performances will be under a microscope as they vie for their spots. Here's where it gets interesting. How these two backups manage the play clock and distribute the ball will dictate whether the front office feels comfortable with the current depth chart or decides to look elsewhere for help. What I really think is that the coaching staff has already seen enough during those productive joint sessions to make their final evaluations. Would you really risk a key starter over an exhibition victory? I certainly would not, even though sitting through a game devoid of our top talent is never fun for those of us in the Bull Nation. When you put both of today's stories together, the picture that emerges for the Houston Texans is a front office prioritizing long-term durability over the short-term thrill of preseason results. Trent Brown stepping in as the starting right tackle while Braden Smith recovers from that plantar fascia injury confirms our reliance on proven veterans to manage the line, while keeping our starters away from the Panthers on Friday avoids needless injury risk. Here's what people are missing. This isn't just about shuffling the depth chart. It is about insulating our core assets against the physical attrition that often ruins playoff runs. Does the prospect of Brown anchoring that right side against the Buffalo Bills make you feel more confident about our protection than you were a week ago? I want to hear from you in the comments. Furthermore, since DeMeco Ryans is playing it safe by resting our starters after the joint practices, are you comfortable with our second stringers handling the heavy lifting against Carolina? I admit that I want to see if Davis Mills can command that offense with enough authority to prove our depth is truly championship caliber. This strategy, while frustrating for those of us itching for live action, demonstrates a level of maturity that signals this franchise is finally operating with a clear, calculated vision for the next several seasons. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. I'm still pushing toward our first 4,000 subscribers, and every one of you helps me get there. Texans fans, I'll see you in the next one. I'll be back later to update you with the latest Houston Texans news.